Welcome, everyone, to the OverAnalyzers. It's our new show where we talk about nothing. We analyze nothing. We are totally happy with the way we are. Just kidding. Welcome to the OverAnalyzers. I'm Dan. He's Mike. Believe it or not, I'm drinking a butter beer. It's a homemade butter beer. It's not from Universal. It has vodka, butterscotch schnapps, and cream soda. It's actually really good. So, what are you
Wow.
drinking?
A bourbon. The end.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers. Wow. Look at you. Well, jokes aside, I've been analyzing something quite a bit this week. How do I get into this? You and I are a bit obsessed with memory, right? We've
Yeah.
had this almost one of the main ideas of the show has been that if you learn something and then you forget it, you wasted your time. And we've argued about whether that's 100% true or not, but we're standing by that. But there's an aspect of memory that we haven't really talked about much yet, and I think we want to get into that today. So here's an example. Say you're at some social event and you meet somebody and they say, "Hey, my name's Jim." And you go, "Hey, my name is Mike." And then you instantly forget that person's name, which I have done 1,000 times over, right? The solution to that is to employ some of the memory techniques that we've talked about. So you might meet this person and they say, "Hey, my name's Jim." And you go, "Okay, I got to do this thing." So you think, "Jim, what does Jim sound like? What does that remind me of?" And you think, "Oh, I remember those meat sticks that I used to eat as a kid that they would sell at like 7-Eleven, a Slim Jim." Okay, Slim Jim. And so you picture this guy, maybe he's skinny, and you picture him as a Slim Jim and somebody biting his head off or something. And so you're you're creating this visual, and you're I promise almost guaranteed to remember that this person's name is Jim. And that technique does three specific things. The first one, the most obvious one, is that it creates something very vivid, right? Your mind does not have a lot of trouble holding on to this image of this person sort of morphed into a meat stick and then having his head bitten off. It's absurd and violent and ridiculous, but that's the point. You're going to remember that. So it creates something vivid that your mind can hold on to. The next thing it does is it creates an association between this person and this, otherwise boring one syllable name, right? You're looking at what this person looks like and associating it with the name. But the third thing it does, which is a little bit sneakier, is that it forces you to focus on the word Jim. And believe it or not, that's one of the biggest components to all of these techniques. In fact, I use this kind of stuff all the time when I'm learning something and trying to remember it, and we have gone on and on about spaced repetition. Very, very often, I will find some piece of information that I want to remember, and then I'll sit there and go, "Okay, what is this? How do I visualize this? What does it make me think of? How do I build this vivid thing in my head?" And I go through all this pain and think, "Okay, here I go. Here I got this, vivid thing that I'm going to remember now." And then I never ever use it again, because just the act of me having to sit my mind on that piece of information and actually think about it and engage with it is enough for me to just remember it. And so, weirdly, a lot of these memory techniques are, in a strange sense, not always needed. They have this side effect of getting you to focus intensely on this single piece of information. So that's the thing that we want to talk about, is this idea of focus. And I'm pretty sure that if you were to discard all of the memory techniques that we've talked about and you just made a point of focusing on information, you would get partway there. Like, you might get a 30 to 40% improvement in memory versus the, let's say, 100% that we're looking at by, using powerful memory techniques. But obviously there's more to the world than just remembering things. I think being able to focus on something is a prerequisite for anything. Anything you ever want to learn or progress at or do or anything begins with you being able to focus on it. So what is your relationship to focus? How do you feel about it? How does that fit into your life?
Well, for a long time, like growing up, I kind of just thought like in order to focus on something, you just sort of had to like brute force your way into it. And it was always just sort of based off of sheer willpower,
Hmm.
you know? So like if you couldn't focus on something right then, like it was all your fault. And I don't know, you just weren't strong enough or something.
Yeah.
But over the last, I don't know, years or so, I've started to recognize that it kind of goes in waves. And the things you do affect your ability or capability of focusing. So, and I kind of thought about it like this. Your focus brain is like this magic water, okay? Or it's like
Cool.
just water. And sometimes I try to group in multiple meanings into one metaphor, and it doesn't always work. So we'll see how this
I
goes.
like
But
this. I'm already excited about the magic water metaphor.
okay, so your focus brain is like this liquid water, and I've noticed that if you give that focus a a container of time, okay, so if you give yourself 20 minutes to solve a problem, if you are very focused and you're working at your optimum level of focus, you will solve that problem in that 20 minutes that you're given. Also, conversely, if you're given a week to solve a problem, or for me, like do a piece, strangely, it always takes me exactly 1 week
Hmm.
to do that piece. So your brain and your focus sort of fills this time frame or this time container or environment that you're given. When it's working really, really well, it flows like water, just like you said in that one episode where you want to flow like water.
I mean, Bruce
And
Lee said that. That's
well,
Bruce
okay,
Lee.
yes, you said that thing that Bruce Lee said.
Right. I'm not taking credit for that.
Okay, well, good job. Uh, that's when it's working really, really well. But if you do a lot of, we'll call them like toxic distractions or something, where you are constantly checking your phone or you're always watching TV or you're always like in that distraction world or constantly picking up these little distraction things, your your fluid focus water gets all contaminated and like this it becomes like this toxic sludge, okay, where it's sort of like this, it turns from water into this gelatinous weird shape. So you take that shape and you put it into this container or this environment and it doesn't flow. Like it might sort of start falling apart a little bit or trying to take the shape, but it can't because all of these other things are in there, like contaminating the focus. So what I have noticed is that it actually takes a few days for me to start leaving behind all those distractions or those, like this scrolling through Reddit or
Hmm.
doom scrolling or binging TV or whatever it is. It takes a few days for me to kind of slowly filter and clean the focus water to where I'm able to flow and understand the environment and move quickly between things and hold things together in my mind and be able to really focus on something. And it's not as simple as just brute force. I'm going to focus. Like I've been total trash for the last week, but today I'm going to focus 100% and you can't do it. Um, so that's kind of what I've noticed is that it's sort of like, it's just like when you come back to working out, like the first few times is really, really difficult. But then, 2 weeks in, you start feeling strong again and you start feeling refreshed. And it's like all that focus water is clean and flowing again. Okay. Enough of
Right. So as usual, that's a weird metaphor that really resonates with me. I like it a lot because that is, I think, what it feels like. Here's a maybe a different take on that. So quickly, let's define focus a little bit because we didn't actually do that. Uh, I would like to
that.
think about focus as your not even ability, just you putting your mind, drawing it down into one thing and keeping it there. Right. So that's
But,
good.
well, it's not just one thing. I mean, it's like everything associated with that thing. It's really hard to
I know,
pin
I know.
down, I
Actually, that's part of what is hard to define when you start thinking about what is one thing. I could sit there and focus solely on scrolling through Reddit for 3 hours, but that's not one thing. Or like, it's hard to say. Or you could watch a TV show, but that's constantly jumping from one thing to another. The camera, on average, switches to a different camera shot every couple seconds. Like, it's a little bit hard to define, but for whatever that means to you, keeping your mind on something for an extended period of time, that's kind of what we're talking about. And leaving that definition alone for a second, I have noticed in myself that my mind doesn't really want to do that. It likes to focus on Reddit because, like I said, Reddit is not actually one thing. It's constant context switching and moving from one thing to the next, and nothing really occupies your attention for very long at all. It's this constant little spikes of stimulation. And I'll notice that if I try to focus on one thing for a while, like my job or some project I'm working on or anything, as soon as it becomes difficult or even just enough time goes by, my mind wants to switch. It wants to go do something else. And there's like the context switching penalty. I think it's a pretty well-known thing, where if you're looking at or working on one thing and then your mind switches to something else, there's these few moments of your mind just kind of floating around, not having really any information in it yet. Like, you're just opening a new tab, you're firing up Facebook, and you're going to go see what's there. There's this little purgatory zone where your mind isn't having to try to do anything. It's just switching, right? And what's that?
Sorry. I recognized that phenomenon of your brain just kind of like searching for literally anything that comes along, or like days where you're not, I don't know, you're just not focused, but you still kind of want to do stuff. So like, I'll go to my computer, I'll work on something for 10 minutes, and I'm like, oh, I should be doing this. And so you go over there and work on that. I called it see an enemy brain, where you're just kind of reaching for whatever comes along, and you'll just, if something comes along or hits your whatever your sea anemone tentacle things, you just grab it. If it looks good, you just grab it. And so in my little notes or category of notes, I have sea anemone brain.
Okay. I like that. I was thinking of it more as purgatory brain, where it's kind of floating between things, and but that works too. I think that is something my brain very often likes to do. And it's almost like, eating crappy food, right? It's fun to eat candy bars. There's just this natural draw to it. There's something about the sweetness and the palatability and the everything that goes into a candy bar that makes it really nice to eat. But obviously, if you eat that all day, you start to feel like crap. That's what my brain is kind of like. And I've noticed if the design of a site like Reddit or Facebook or anything is to cater to that in every way possible. You're never really engaged with anything for very long. It's constant novelty, constant context switching. And it's like it is this hyper engineered way of letting your brain just kind of float from one thing to another and never have to do anything difficult. And if it's also that way for a lot of other media. So if you go watch a show or a movie, not everything is like this, but for the most part, it's designed around very quick switching from one thing to another. Especially modern stuff, like, you feel it a lot more now. Did you ever watch 2001: A Space Odyssey? I think it's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
That's been on my list of things to watch since forever.
You should watch it.
I am familiar with it, but yeah.
So it's very old, and you can tell because it expects you to focus on something for an absurdly long amount of time. I remember Dad making me watch this movie because he was like, it's a classic, you have to appreciate it. And there's this scene where some kind of door is opening, some big like hangar bay door or something. And so you have the shot of this door, and it's opening from one side to the other, and it's comically slow. Like, it's just crawling. And you're sitting there looking at it thinking, okay, obviously, the camera's going to switch any second now. There's no way we're actually going to watch this door open from this side of the screen to that side of the screen. And you go down this journey of, oh my God, we really are going to watch this door open. Like we're really going to do this. And I don't know how long you're sitting there, but it's an eternity. And
Right.
we have we've gotten really good. If you compare current media to what we used to do, we've gotten really, really good at optimizing things for your brain in that sense, where it's constantly switching from one thing to another. And you're never really forced to focus on something, especially something boring, for an extended period of time. All that to say this. My mind doesn't really want to focus on things for a long period of time. It wants to be constantly switching. And I, again, really like your metaphor there. It kind of feels like polluted water. It isn't good. If I go for long periods of time where this is happening a lot, it feels very similar to eating a bunch of crap all day long. I feel gross and my mind feels gross. And so I think that, at least for me, one of the major goals that I have is to try and get the water clear, or be able to maintain focus for longer periods of time. But that is not natural. That is, I'm forcing myself to eat things that maybe don't taste quite so good, and it's like mentally.
Right.
So I think that you have done pretty well with this, and I have a couple theories why, but you strike me as someone who has a pretty good focus. What do you think goes into that, or do you agree at all, or what?
Well, thanks. I don't know. I mean, I'm yeah. I, well, I think what you're trying to say or observing is that yeah, I don't watch like TV really, or I don't even play computer games, or I don't really have any fun or do anything interesting besides like my one thing that I do.
Yes, that is part of what I'm saying.
So yes, I'm more boring than most people. I don't know. I think I realized the worth of letting some of those things go. And actually the no TV thing came from one of my favorite artists. He does not own a TV at all. Never has. He used to, I don't know, have it for like a month every year for his kids or something. But he basically said he decided he was going, you have to choose which side of the TV you're going to be on. And
Okay.
you want to be the one, creating the content. So for me, it's been like, that just constantly runs through my head. So when when I start seeing things like that pop up, like, oh, I spend too much time on Instagram. Okay, that's it. Like I'm cutting it
Yeah.
out for a while. So that's just what I do. And it has a huge effect on me being able to focus on things. But also, I never stop wanting those little distractions. And
Mhm.
I tried to label like the different types of distractions. And you said like candy distractions, and that's my first category of like the types of distractions that you go for. Um, the first type of distraction is to like avoid boredom. So I get, when I sit down to work, there comes a time where I get kind of bored, or especially at the start, where
Yeah.
you're having trouble breaking through. You get a little bored, so your brain instantly wants some candy. It wants like a candy distraction.
Mhm.
So it reaches for, all the very quick, easy things, like you check your phone for notifications or for emails, or to just scroll Instagram, or you
Right.
know some people have TikTok that just, whatever. All of those really simple things. For me, a lot of times it's just, oh, I'm kind of bored. I'll turn on some music. I mean, I do it so quickly. It's like, I'll just turn on music and then I'm kind of paying attention to music, half working, half not. So I'm like trying to save myself from boredom. Or you will watch like, a quick YouTube video or whatever, or check the news. Those are all kind of like very quick candy distractions, is what
Mhm.
I'm trying to call them. And then I guess I'll just keep going. The second type of distraction, or the thing that kind of keeps you from focusing, at least for me, is like the second level of distraction. And I'm calling those mask distractions because they don't reveal themselves as distractions. They use an excuse. Like for me, a lot of times, instead of working, I'll think, oh, you know what? I should go watch a tutorial first, or I should go watch
Mhm.
this whole educational DVD first before I start working, which obviously tutorials and educational things are wonderful, but I use those as excuses a lot of the time to stop focusing. And I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Because it sounds really good, and so they're able to easily justify it to themselves. So, oh, and chores and urgent things that come up. I'll use those a lot as distractions or just ways
Mm-hmm.
to get out of work. So, I'm not like a type of person that's super focused or whatever. It's like I still struggle like all the time to try to get rid of some of these things. But my last category are the monster distractions, which are literally just life, like what happened to you 2 weeks ago, um, where life just happens, and
Yeah.
it's almost better to work with those things or to readjust your process or whatever, and try to find a way to work with those bigger life things, or like if you're having trouble with your health or whatever, like you can't just focus your way through it. Like you have to work with it or find a new way to do things. um, I mean, there's more we could say on all of that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but yes and no. I think I'm just more ruthless when it comes to ripping things out of my life that distract me from focusing, but I still get
So
distracted all the time.
this is a major problem for me, is my ability to focus on something and keep the water clear, right? And I so I've gone through periods like that where I go, I'm throwing my phone away, I'm cutting out everything, I'm going to take a really extreme perspective on this. And a big part of the problem is that I am not an artist who can sit there and draw a painting for however many hours. I'm a software developer, and it's not feasible for me to cut off the internet, or
Oh, well, I have not cut off the internet either. There's
right,
just like I don't use Reddit anymore,
right,
and there's a couple things because I loved Reddit. Like,
right,
I was
right,
reading it all the time. So now I just totally stopped. But I also have not cut out the internet. I can't. I also can't cut out
right.
my phone. I actually would if I could, and I'm
Yeah,
sure I could make some major life changes to get rid of it, but I need it for work. And we've talked about that
yeah, yeah.
before, but
Okay. Well, I'll skip to this then. What I have found to be the most helpful is, you said earlier that we always tend to think about focus like it's a willpower problem. And whenever you lack the ability to focus, you tend to just say, I suck. I'm bad at this. I need to try harder to focus. And I think that's probably the wrong approach, because there's certainly a place for willpower. Like, you have to make decisions. But for me, the most powerful things that I've been able to do are to try and change my environment, where I have a script set up on my computer where if I'm working, and I have it set like on a timer, where if I'm working and I switch to the browser, it locks the computer and it forces me to put in my password. And it still lets me go there because I need to use the browser sometimes. I need to look at Stack Overflow. I need to read articles. Like, there's a lot of internet access that I need to do, but it puts a lot of friction there. So when I'm focusing on something like, working on a piece of software and it gets difficult, it makes that floaty context switch harder, where it's not as rewarding. And I just naturally, I go to switch to the browser, but then I have to unpleasantly put in this very long, difficult password. I have,
right.
Reddit, like there's another layer where Reddit is blocked in my hosts file. And if I want to access Reddit, which I do still sometimes have legitimate need to do, I have to go in there and like edit a file and unlock it for a while. And like it makes it a pain, but it's really helpful. And it just, like, anything that I found like that sets up the environment to where it's less conducive to me losing focus has been better. And here's a couple things that are not quite so, obscure. There's an app called Forest, which I started playing with this week. It's pretty neat. It's for your phone. You start it, and it like plants a tree, and your tree grows for the next 20 minutes. And if you switch out of the app, or usually you like lock your phone, but if you open your phone and switch out of the app, your tree dies, which is sad. And then
Like
throughout the
that,
day,
yeah.
like, you have this little plot of all the trees that you grow. And so there's this little reward mechanism for you leaving your phone alone. And that doesn't always work for me because during the day, I don't really use my phone anyway. I'm just at a computer. But in the evenings, if I'm even just hanging out or watching something or doing whatever, using that as, okay, I can't use my phone for the next 25 minutes or my tree dies, which is very sad. uh, I resist that at first. There's all these moments of even just watching a show that maybe I'm not that interested in. I want to keep like switching into my phone and pulling that out. It makes me not do that. And pretty quickly, my mind starts to calm where I'm just engaged with this one thing. And that's, been helpful in that case. Um, Time boxing
I think,
for, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, okay. Well, I kind of have that same thing. In the movie Signs, after the aliens come, the boy, I can't remember his name, but he starts having like this asthma attack, and he can't breathe.
Yep.
And the dad, Mel Gibson, but the dad comes over and like is trying to get him to breathe with him and like give him this rhythm of breathing. And eventually he's able to catch his breath. And I think that all the time boxing, setting a timer, doing the tree thing, what I've started doing in my car is if there's a topic that I really want to think about, normally if you just kind of think about it, your mind starts wandering everywhere. And then, before you know it, you're thinking about a TV show or just something random that
Yeah.
happened the other day, or whatever. Your brain just goes all over the place. I've started pressing record on my voice memos and I'll just talk about it. And I've been able to like really focus on subjects and explore like whole new ways of thinking about things or to a whole new level. And I think what it is, all the setting the timer for 20 minutes, pressing record, talking about like what we do right here is talk for 30 minutes. What it does is it gives you the pace. It gives you that rhythm of breathing that you need so you don't have to constantly hold it yourself. And it kind of just keeps the pace for you. And I think that's what all these different tactics are for, is to give you that rhythm so you stop questioning and having to constantly make that decision of, no, I'm going to focus. I'm not going to get distracted, you know.
It's funny. I used to do that when I was doing a lot of YouTube content. I used to do that all the time. And the problem was that I would be working on a video that I wanted to upload, and my mind would get stuck where it's like I would keep repeating things and going over ideas over and over at the very start of what I wanted to say, and I could never actually get through the whole thing. And I think that's just a natural thing that your brain does, is it wants to fixate and sit there and kind of spin and idle. It's much more comfortable for your mind. And using something like that, like I would literally do the same thing. I would just record myself and say, okay, I'm talking, I have to keep going, I have to progress through different
Right.
ideas, and focus on this for a long time without starting to get into that state of jumping around. That made a huge difference. Something kind of similar that I've been doing is using a distraction sheet while I'm working on something, where if something pops in my head, instead of just going to do it or just putting it aside, I'll just write it down. Like, oh, I want to go read about this. And then at the end of the time box, I do my 25 minutes of working. Then I look at these list of things and I pick the ones that are actually interesting and weren't just me wasting time.
I do the same thing now.
Cool.
On every page that I'm drawing or practicing or whatever, or anything that I'm doing, now I'm doing like this painting and I have a document on my phone now. Everything that pops into my head, that's, a question that I'm struggling with, or even just, a problem that I just solved, no matter how big or small, I write it down. And then by the end, I have this huge list of things that happened in my brain that normally would completely go unnoticed and I would never think back on them. But I have this log of all of these things that entered my brain, and I get to choose later if I want to explore any of them. Or
Yeah.
yeah,
One
that's been a huge thing.
one more thing here. So this week we were planning on talking about focus, so I've been trying to really pay attention to it. And in the effort, or because of me focusing on focus, if that makes sense, I've been trying to look at, okay, what makes me focus, how do I improve it, and everything like that. I have been sleeping a lot better this week, according to like the metrics that I get from my like watch and everything. My resting heart rate is lower than it has actually ever been, at least according to the watch. And I PR'd my bench press and pull-ups this week. Could be a bit of a coincidence, maybe, who knows, but I didn't even set out to improve my focus this week. I really just wanted to pay attention to it. And we've said similar things before about like procrastination and whatnot, but just me being attentive to my focus and what my brain is doing has had some pretty great side effects. And I don't want to claim that, oh, it changed my life, but it's been a really good week and my mood has been better and a lot of things have been better. And it's made me think that even outside of just learning and getting good at things and so on and so forth, it's pretty important, I think. Like keeping your mind in a healthy, keeping the water clear, keeping it in a healthy state is a pretty huge deal. And I don't think we fully appreciate how messed up most of the things we do are from that perspective, where creating so much noise in your head, it's not killing you, but it sure feels different to be able to focus calmly. And the anxiety has been lower this week, my mood has been better, there's been a lot of things. So I think focus is very important.
Agreed.
All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week with something else. You can leave us comments on YouTube, you can hang out with us on Discord, you can email us at the OverAnalyzers podcast at gmail.com. I guess I'm rusty on this. But cool. We'll see you next week.